Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood for YouTube. I am here to do a review of Dark Shadows episode number 95, written by Ron Sproat, directed by John Sedgwick. This episode, we're still in Bangor, Maine with Victoria Winters and Frank Gardner, as my dog is trying to lick me. Um, and, this episode is really interesting too because Vicky has been ever since her ghost encounter with Bill Malloy. She's been telling everybody about that encounter pretty much, and this time she tells Frank Gardner, who is basically the equivalent of having a date with her. Though this is not their official date. It's just he's trying to help her find her lineage and stuff like that, and he asked her a bunch of questions. He goes, "Well, did anything happen to you when you were locked in the room?" Because she told him, "Well, David locked me in the room and stuff like that." And she says, "Well, I fell asleep." He says, "You see, you were dreaming." She goes, "Oh no, I was awake." And she also tells Frank in this episode, she goes, "Can I tell you something really crazy?" She goes, "I can't wait to go back there." And he goes, "Why?" He goes, "You're scared," or you say you're scared of the house, because she does tell him, "I'm scared of that house." Um, and though this is sort of the first time you're hearing Vicky say this out loud to anybody she really trusts, you sort of got that sense, I think, always, especially from the first episode on, when Vicky enters the house and Joe plays this fake little prank on her, that there is something scary about Collingwood. Um, so this here, you also have Vicky telling Frank she feels like she belongs in that house. Not saying that she's a Collins, but she feels that she belongs in that house, which she may very well. Um, you also get Burke Devlin in this episode and his attorney, James Blair. I should say business acquaintance, who has the same kind of fountain pen that Victoria Winters lost. Really, she didn't lose it. Roger took it. Vicky blamed it on David. That's why David locked her in the abandoned room in the West Wing. Now, what I like most about this episode, what Ron Sproat does really, really, really well. Now, from an audience standpoint, nobody's going to believe that Burke tried to kill Bill Malloy. If you're Victoria Winters, you sort of have to look at this from her standpoint. On the trip up from Bangor, which was just not 2 episodes ago, you literally had a very morbid conversation with Burke Devlin, and all the morbid talk was coming from Burke, obviously, about how he wants to get rid of the Collins family. As Vicky puts it, Burke Devlin could be a very gentleman and a very violent, frightening man at times. And I think that is a great description of a man who she hasn't known for very long. I would agree with Vicky here. So Burke has a very deep-seated hatred for the Collinses, especially Roger. Now, if you're going to ask why, other than seeing the same kind of pen that Burke has, remember James Blair is carrying the same kind of pen because Burke gave him one of those pens. Why exactly does Vicky think Burke had something to do with Bill Malloy's death, outside of the morbid conversation? Well, you got to understand, Vicky found said fountain pen at the beneath Lookout Point on the beach. Lookout Point is where Bill Malloy's body was supposed to have went in, okay? Or found, if you will, whatever you want to say. Then the pen goes missing. She thought it was David. Now, if at this point in time, as a character, Victoria Winter still thinks it's David. Who has been, outside of Carolyn, who's been really loyal to Burke Devlin? David Collins. So, again, not saying Vicky thinks that much about David, but again, who did lock her in the room? It was David. So this does lead the question, though. This episode does leave the question, who did take the pen if you're Vicky? And I feel that's something I wish they would have did a little more out loud here, because the audience knows who took the pen. Who does Vicky honestly think took the pen at this moment? We don't really get an answer. Oh, and another thing too is Victoria Winters does lie. She lies to James Blair after she swears up and down she's seen a pen just like this, and then when she takes a close look, she goes, "You know what? I didn't really see a pen just like this. It must have been my mistake." And James Blair brushes it off like it's no big deal. Keep in mind, Victoria Winters also in this episode has asked Burke Devlin for a car ride back to Collinsport, which she did in the previous episode. But he's going to take her. Her bags are packed. That they're waiting to go. And Vicky says, "Hey, I got to make a phone call." Keep in mind, she was talking to Frank Gardner earlier. She tries to phone Frank, can't get a hold of him. Then she says to Collins, "Can you connect me to Collinwood?" Which is in Collinsport, obviously. And by the way, here's my question before I finish this episode, because I wasn't alive back then. So Bangor, Maine to Collinsport, Maine, 50 miles. Would that have been long distance? Because Vicky does not say long distance, if that's the case. I'm just asking. I don't fucking know. So you have Vicky talking to Roger Collins, and she says, "I think Burke had something to do with Bill Malloy's death." And she goes, "You remember that fountain pen?" And Roger's like, "Yeah, because he's the one who took it." He goes, "You got to come get me." And he goes, "In this stormy night, all right, I'll come." Because again, it's pouring down rain. I like how we see the lightning and the thunder, really cool effect as Roger is leaving the house and it is pouring down raining. Cool shot of of Roger leaving the house. We do get to see the inside of Collinwood. Again, we don't get many in the way of sets here. We only get Bangor, Maine. We get the dining room again. We get inside the phone booth, and we get Collinwood. Those are our three sets here. It's not much. But I will say what we really get here, what I love most about Ron Sproat's writing here is the reintroduction of the pen building and more of a plot point for the pen. Do I think he introduced that plot point? No. Really, that plot point was more introduced by Art Wallace. But what we're really, really doing here is we're making more of an emphasis on the pen because it hasn't been brought up. The last time it was brought up was for David. Okay, now we're and that's something you got to pay attention to too when you're going through these episodes. Remember that Victoria Winters was locked in that room because she thought David took the pen. We know Roger took it. Now Victoria sees James Blair have the same exact pen, and now Vicky has learned that the person who the pen she found belonged to, it did initially belong to Burke. She just doesn't know how many hands have touched it since Burke. She doesn't know it was originally given to Carolyn. She doesn't know Carolyn actually had to give it to Roger because Roger made her give it to her. And Roger was going to give it back to Burke when he saw him at the meeting Bill Malloy arranged, but he lost the pen, as he says. And the pen was obviously found beneath Lookout Point. Really, really well written here by Ron Sproat. I really enjoy his writing. And I really enjoy the character interaction here, too. I think one of the most underrated things in this episode, other than the pen, because, again, as an audience member, you're not really believing Burke has murdered Bill Malloy because we know the arrangement that was made between Malloy and Burke. That hasn't been forgotten to me. in my opinion. That's something I have never forgotten. What I find most amazing is Vicky's lie and Vicky's determination to go back to Collinwood, because she honestly does feel she belongs there. And it also gives you a sense of an audience member of maybe this is why, honestly, Vicky just hasn't honestly left. Maybe she does feel she belongs there. Maybe she finally feels, okay, something about this place, I can't just leave. And then I've threatened to leave, but I can't bring myself to leave, no matter how many times I threaten it. That's something that has been on the table many times. Vicky has threatened to leave, but she hasn't left. She hasn't left Collinwood. She hasn't left Collinsport and not come back. She's gone places and gone back to Collinwood, but she hasn't left for good. And that's something to consider when you're watching this episode and looking at it. It's a really interesting dynamic. Does Vicky feel like she honestly belongs there? Her answer is yes, and I believe her. But also, do you as an audience member feel she belongs there? It does seem like the woman and the place of Collinwood are destined to be together, or just meant to be together. And that's a very, very interesting dynamic, considering this woman now knows she's living in a haunted house. As you can see, my dog is resting up. All right, guys, you have a good night, and take care.